Frank Corrado is a former Vancouver Canuck, a TSN hockey analyst, former Calder Cup finalist, too.
That's true.
With the Utica Comets. How are you, Frank?
Good, boys. All good. I'm happy to see the boys got it done. However many years later. What is it? 10 years later?
10 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
10 years.
That's awesome. Good. That's cool.
Yeah. So what can that do for an organization? What can that do for some of these young men?
I think the hope is that it turns into, do you remember when John Cooper and Norfolk won the Calder Cup and they had those dominant teams and a lot of those players just moved on up to Tampa and they weren't necessarily like the marquee guys, although they were really good, like, Killorn and Tyler Johnson, very good players. And they grew with that group and they were winners at the AHL level and winners at the NHL level when it was all said and done. And I think there's something to be said for, like we talked about last week, I think, where you train and breed winners. And those guys, it's like a contagious thing where it just kind of becomes what you're all about, right? Like now those guys are all branded champions and they grinded. Like, let me tell you something, man, going far in the AHL playoffs and winning it, like I didn't win it, but we went far. That is a grind of like sacrifice, like different than the NHL. Mm-hmm. There's not big bonus money on the line. There's not huge TV ratings. You're doing it for the betterment of your career and the guys that your brothers that you're with. And so I guess now the hope becomes, can those guys parlay that into NHL success as winners? And that's, that's what they're halfway to doing, I guess. Now you just have to find a way to do it at the NHL level. That's what I think you get out of that.
Stretching out a lot of these guys, too, especially the Euros that haven't played a lot of games. Even Archer Sheelovs, he's never been a workhorse goaltender because, in the development league, you don't generally get the 60-start guy. This is quite a year of stretching out your legs and figuring out how to make it through a regular season in the playoffs too, huh? Yeah, exactly, right? Like you learn what your boundaries are as a player. You learn how to push yourself at times, how to pace yourself, and I mean that in the right way, right? Like when to pick your battles and how to make sure your body's ready to withstand everything that playoff hockey and the grueling schedule of the travel and the games every other nights entails. But yeah, I think that when you do something like that, and I remember like looking back on our experience, you kind of push yourself mentally and physically to a different level where, I remember one of the games ended in 4 overtimes. Like it went to the 4th overtime. And I remember sitting in my stall afterwards just saying, thank God it's done. Like I almost got to the point where you're like, I just need this game to end. We can't do it anymore. And then once you get to the final and we lost in the final, you're like, you're heartbroken, you're crushed. But at the same time, you're like, I'm so battered and beat up. I needed the reprieve. And of course you would have liked to win, and these guys won. So they get that. Like, but I think you learn about, what a grueling grind it actually can be, and what you're, where you can kind of take your body, which is pretty amazing to see yourself do that. I know you weren't able to watch every minute of these games, so I won't ask you for details on how they got it done, but the end result is 2 guys in particular stood out for me in terms of their ability to rise and score big goals at big times. Linus Karlsson did it in volume with 14 goals in the playoffs. And Danila Klimovic, who's sort of been left for dead as a prospect to some degree, didn't have the volume, but had the timeliness of scoring overtime goals, game winners, and big goals like he did last night in the clincher as well. Now, again, the volume's not there for Klimovic in the playoffs necessarily, but he had a really nice regular season, and he's starting to show that maybe he's still worth keeping around. These 2 players, what does it do for each of these 2 guys in terms of just their own confidence, but also how the organization might view them?
Well, the first thing is the confidence from the player. I think that goes without saying. Just, when you build your internal highlight reel, now the most recent highlights are big ones, right? Like playoff goals, stuff on the line, and meaningful moments. So that obviously is first and foremost. But as far as the organization, I think there's always this working kind of evaluation on where the players are at. And a lot of it is, regular season stuff. We'll watch you play 2 games in a weekend, and then we'll watch you play 2 games next weekend, and we'll catch you on a Wednesday. But to watch guys play when the chips are down, you only get so many moments to actually do that. Like there's not a lot of moments in the course of a regular season where you get to see guys in the AHL and say chips are down. Like you used to be able to do it maybe on a 3-and-3, and you would watch a guy on a Sunday afternoon in Bridgeport and say, what has he got? Because they just played in Providence and they played in Manchester, and now they're in Bridgeport on Sunday in front of 6 people. What are you bringing to the table, right? Little bit of a character revealer. But I think you got your free character revealer here in the playoffs, so that should do a lot for as far as how those guys are viewed within the organization. The big thing, though, is from the player's point of view, you can't trick yourself into thinking that because you did all that, there's a spot waiting for you, or they're opening the door for you. You have to still go in and like break it down, because at the end of the day, the NHL team, it's different. Like those are guys' jobs. There's contracts and term and millions of dollars attached to that. So you might get the opportunity come training camp. You're still going to have to find a way to break down that door, though, because it's the way that the salary cap and the world we live in these things are allocated, like there's like a little bit of a pecking order. You have to disrupt that pecking order still.
Right. I want to move on here to the big Canucks, but just one last one on the baby Canucks. Linus Karlsson, the hero here in terms of goal scoring for the club through its run. He's a wall work net front guy. Frank, we've heard so much about how the AHL is a different game, that it is less predictable than the NHL. Guys aren't in quite the same spots that they're supposed to be. It's a little more helter-skelter. For a guy who makes his living on the boards and in the net front, how similar is the AHL game to the NHL game? How much should that translate?
In that regard, it is similar, because you're going to do the same things and realize that at the NHL level, things filter and funnel to the front of the net really quickly. Like I found, everything that you said about the AHL and the NHL there, it's all true, right? Like it can be a little more scrambled. Guys in the AHL aren't necessarily in their spots as quickly as they're supposed to be compared to the NHL. But the big thing, it's like, when you get to the NHL level, you realize the play on the perimeter and like the hanging out there and stick handling, it doesn't happen as much. Like it gets to the net in a hurry. Watch how the Panthers played against Edmonton. That puck would get dumped in and the forecheck would be on. And it's like, if they're getting it back within 5 seconds, that thing got funneled. And that is something that I think a lot of NHL teams aspire to be like. And in the AHL, I think at times it can, the cycle can hang out and it can stay to the outside. So for him, that's your game. Do it at the NHL level, and that's something that I think is translatable, because I don't know, there's something to be said about a guy like Burrows, who we all saw and I played with, where when there was a whistle in front of the opposition's goaltender, there was number 14. He was just always around it, and I think coaches realize that stuff and they say, like, I know where this guy's going to be. So there's a level of predictability to that. So in that regard, I do think that's something that can easily translate.
If he had speed, Burrows would be the perfect. He just doesn't have the Burrows skating. It's the only problem with Linus Karlsson, but we'll see if it translates. Though, one last little thing on the short off season now for these guys. How hard is it for them? This is deeper than the Stanley Cup final now. Like, this is the shit. Are you still feeling it? Are in early September? Are you still exhausted? What do you think?
This is where, like, in my experience, this was the toughest part, because I finished that playoff run. I had played with a separated AC joint, and I had played with a broken bone in my hand, and I had missed 5 games to let the bone just heal just enough that I didn't have to shoot it up anymore, right? Because we were shooting it up for a bit, and I couldn't feel my hand, and I was playing awful because I couldn't stick handle. So that's the tough part now. All these guys have wear and tear and aches and pains and would have been playing through stuff, and now you probably need more. And this, I think, applies more to the younger guys than the veteran guys, because you need more time to to heal and recover. And then generally, the younger guys, your goal is bigger, faster, stronger every summer. So how do you get bigger, faster, stronger in less than half the time and be ready to go take someone's job come training camp? Like that, it's really hard. It's like it's mission impossible, really, for the guys.
For a guy like Lekramaki, that's the concern here. Is he going to be able to bulk up and be stronger for camp, right?
Exactly, because if his season was done in the middle of April, he would have taken his 3.5 weeks off, and he would have started this program, and it would have been 16, 18 weeks long, and it's like made to get you, on the moving treadmill for training camp time. He doesn't have that luxury now. So at some point here, he's going to have to wing it to a certain degree because you just don't have the time. You don't have the lead up time, but you should have an organization who understands that and recognizes that and says, if he doesn't have the training camp that we think he should have, well, look how could we have expected that based on what he just went through? So that's why you still keep like long-term vision and long-term plans in mind for situations like that.
Okay, bear with me on this one, but we just want to outline what we're talking about here in Vancouver. Archer Sheloves, the playoff MVP, obviously boosted his stock here in the organization's eye, if not beyond. Saravelli reporting that a third of the league is on the goaltender market, and that's everything from starter to co-starter to pure backup. It's a pretty weak free agent class of goaltenders where Jake Allen, of all people, stands alone and above the rest. So we're asking on our Whistler Golf Club poll question, if Demko is the best chip to get him a top six forward, given the environment here, should the Canucks trade him? What do you think, Frank?
Well, I guess it always is going to depend on what the return is, right? And I wonder if there's a team who's been on the precipice of winning a Stanley Cup the last 2 years and is a combined 3 wins away from doing it that is, urgent enough to say we need a goalie. And is it John Gibson or is it Thatcher Demko? Or if it's not those two guys, who is it? Is it Swayman in Boston? I guess what I'm saying is, like, can you prey on someone's vulnerability here in the crease? And would a team be willing to say, we can make the deal as soon as possible? We don't have to wait and see what the injury situation is, like how it's going to hold up. It sounds greasy to say something like that, but that's the reality of the marketplace, right? But there are teams like the UFA market. It's like, it's Jake Allen, it's Vladar, it's Lyon. We're not talking about guys that are moving the needle, right? And the thing about this, the Shelovs thing, he played great. He was the MVP. He also played really well, I think, at times. He had some unbelievable games last year in the playoffs for the Canucks, right? That didn't necessarily translate to the NHL success this year. So now I guess you're banking on, if you were to make that deal, the AHL MVP success translating to NHL success right away. So there's I don't know if there's necessarily a guarantee, but he's probably better served after going through what he just went through.
Since you brought it up, I mean, the Canucks are trying to be competitive next year. Would you move Demko in division to the Oilers?
I mean, I think that just depends on the return, right? Like, if you're getting something that you think is going to cancel out the effect of potentially playing against a guy who's a franchise goalie who can be one of the best in the league when he's healthy in your own division, then you'll have that conversation. But, I mean, the division thing, it's funny. Like, I think the division thing used to be such a big conversation because you would play that team so much in the regular season. Now you don't. Like, you play him, 3 or 4 times at the most.
One more in the Central.
It's one more game. The issue is if you meet in the first round of the playoffs, that's the guy that can steal you one. Whereas in the past, the Oilers didn't really have a guy who could steal you one, right? I think it depends on the return. I just don't know who would the Oilers be able to give up that keeps the Canucks
there's not a
competitive right away. They don't have much to give up.
Nuge, but he's got a no move, so he's not going to.
There is no young forward, young top six forward on Edmonton. They're all sort of older.
But
guys.
I think they would trade for Nuge. But again, Nuge is probably not wanting to leave.
Well,
it would have to be like
more than Demko. I think
it would have to be like that Sam O'Reilly, who's their first round pick, who's the centerman who played for London. Like, it's got to start there, and it's got to go plus, I would think. But that's I don't know.
That's a future trade.
That's a future.
Degree,
that's
Frank.
right. That's not that. Yeah, that's not helping you today. That's helping you down the road.
Yeah.
What did you make of the Zegras trade?
The return, I guess, is underwhelming just based on the fact that he's been on the market for so long, but it almost feels like people are just saying Ryan Poehling is just like the worst player ever. He's actually he's a good third line center in the NHL.
Right.
It's not like, it's not like this guy's a complete stiff. So yeah, the return is underwhelming because, Trevor Zegras, when he was at his best, is top 5 most exciting players to watch offensively. Like that's how dynamic and skilled he is. And I find it interesting that he goes to a place like Philly. They can use some skill. Like they're in a situation where they should take a swing on a guy who has a lot of upside offensively because they just don't have a lot of that right now. They're still working to put the pieces in place. But Rick Tocchet is there now. So how is the approach going to be with Rick Tocchet, who we all know very well now from his time in Vancouver? Is it going to be, the Phil Kessel, I'm going to level with you, we're players coach mentality, or is it going to be, I'm ruling with an iron fist, and if I see stupid stuff at the blue line, like we're gonna have issues here, kind of a la John Tortorella, who was just there. I think he's got to go with the softer approach with Zegras. I think he's got to try and find a way to level with him because I can imagine the Cronin approach in Anaheim was not what was most suitable for Trevor Zegras. So I think you're going to have to work with him and kind of level with him on a personal level and get to know the guy and see what makes him tick and show him that, okay, we're going to be patient, we're going to work together, and we want to get you to where you're supposed to be, which is one of the most exciting, dynamic players in the league.
Well, as we know, Tocchet does level with you at a very nice level. Like he communicates, I think, just fine. But ultimately, the bottom line is ice time. and that's where it'll be meted out, right? Like he can communicate with Zegras all that we want in the appropriate way. But ultimately, Rick Tocchet just won't play Zegras if he doesn't feel. And Andrei Kuzmenko and Nils Höglander will vouch for this. Like if you don't do the job, you're not going to play.
Yeah, that's exactly it. But Philly, like this is the right move for a team like Philadelphia. It is. Like they're a work in progress. They're one of the few teams in the league that we can honestly say is still rebuilding and not expected to push up the standings yet. So, I mean, I like it. I hope it works out. I hope it works out for the player because, he's spent some years now in Anaheim where you've almost forgotten that he's there. He's moved around positionally. I still don't think he's a natural center. Like I think he's a winger. But I hope it works out for him and them because I like when teams take swings on guys that might be undervalued or underachieving and they get them to where they're supposed to be. I think it's a great story, and I think it's part of the success that the Florida Panthers have had where they found undervalued contracts and players that were undervalued, whether it was Bennett or Reinhart or Carter Verhaeghe, who they bring in on a $1 million AAV. And they found a way to get those guys to where they are now, and it's the cream of the crop. So, I think there could potentially be a cool story behind this all.
A lot of buzz around Thomas Hertl this morning with Vegas as they look to open up some cap space for a Mitch Marner pursuit. What kind of player are we talking about there?
I mean, like really good player, very well-rounded, I find, with Thomas Hertl. Does a little bit of everything well, and has a nice, like just a a nice base of who he is as a player, where he can play on both sides of the puck, and I think is maybe underappreciated a little bit offensively, just based on. I mean, maybe you guys wouldn't do this, but if you live out east, you don't watch a lot of Thomas Hertl. But I think he is a little underappreciated offensively. The thing with this Vegas is, they brought him in when he was hurt. He's making, because I believe San Jose's eating money, so he's 6.75 against the cap, and he's, a guy who can play center or wing. You're trying to get that money off the books to potentially bring in Mitch Marner, who's a winger, but kind of, I guess, a similar vein, like responsible, like Selke tendencies, more so for Marner than Hertl. But I think there would be a team that would be really happy to get Thomas Hertl and would pay a huge price to do so, because if you think he's your solution at center ice, there's not a lot of solutions here on the board for unrestricted free agency. Like teams that are really going to have to address this position are going to have to take a swing on Hertl in this type of situation. So, I guess we're going to see where it goes.
None that are 6'3", 215 either. Like this is the package. He's not a perfect player, obviously, because he's not the top player in the league by any stretch, but that is a nice setup. That
and can play the middle too,
yes.
right? Like,
yeah. I mean, I think that's what you'd be getting him for. I think you're getting him to play the middle. And just like I just think a smart, well-rounded, good player, who has a lot to offer, like a guy who scored 32 goals. You're getting a
5 years left. 5 years left on the contract at 31. But in the here and now, and what players are going to cost you in free agency this year and going forward, a reasonable bet.
Yeah.
Frankie, thank you very much for this. Appreciate you switching days, coming a little early this week on a Tuesday. We will catch up next week, my friend.
All right, boys. Have a good one.